Hello and welcome back to Bedside Murmurs, a podcast where we chat with doctors about their careers, pathways in medicine, clinical tips and much more. If you have any questions or ideas for guests that you would like to see on the show, please send us an email at podcast@medsoc.org.au. I'm Emily.
And I'm Sean, and we will be your hosts. Today we have the pleasure of chatting with Dr. Ben Bravery, who is a doctor, an author, and advocate. He is the author of the book, The Patient Doctor, which speaks about his journey in medicine and decision to become a doctor. He is currently undertaking specialty training in psychiatry and is an enthusiastic advocate for patients with colorectal cancer and for instigating cultural change in the medical field. Welcome, Dr. Bravery, to Bedside Murmurs.
Thank you very much. Call me Ben. It's very exciting to be here on your wonderful show.
Oh, thank you so much. So you've had a fairly interesting journey into medicine. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure can. How far back do you want me to go?
As far back as you want, basically.
Okay. So before medicine, I was a zoologist.
Yes.
And I had a career in science, zoology, but also science communication. And that took me to lots of interesting places because that's where you have to go when you want to study wildlife. Kangaroos in southeast Queensland, bowerbirds in the forest, and then over to China where I worked on endangered deer and then helped out with research on pandas. And I was about 28, living in Beijing, building a business, doing a bit of work for the Chinese government, and was diagnosed with bowel cancer. It came out of nowhere in the sense that I don't have a family history, but in hindsight, the symptoms were all there. But at 28, with no family history of cancer, let alone bowel cancer, you just assume that, well, I did, after asking Dr. Google, that it was hemorrhoids.
Most reliable.
Right? The blood was so reliable. Still using Dr. Google. It was hemorrhoids, right? The blood that I saw was hemorrhoids. But when you put it all together, weight loss, diarrhea, nausea, night sweats, stuff that we all learn about, first year med, these are cardinal signs. I had like a stage 3 tumour in the sigmoid, and then I went through 18 months of treatment back here in Australia. And then after that, spat back into the world, tried to reborn in a way, losing parts of myself in that process, both psychologically and physically. Yeah. And then tried to go back to that type of work, but realised I needed to do something different. Things had shifted, and did some soul searching and decided to become a doctor.
As you do.
Why not? So I Googled it again.
How do I become a doctor?
Literally, how to become a doctor. I don't come from a line of doctors. So, I was one of the first to go to university, first to travel abroad. So I was like kind of out there on my own, and I had to Google it. And I realized there was this test called the GAMSAT. I paid an exorbitant fee, which would start a process of paying exorbitant fees.
Everything's expensive in medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, studied for it, got in and went to Notre Dame here in Sydney.
Yeah. How did you find the university experience? Like coming back again, I guess.
Yeah, so that's the weird part. So I was 32. And my first degree was analog, right? So it was in the 2000s.
We've had this discussion. For anyone that's confused, basically we have a very digital existence with technology, and like we've basically gone through school with technology. When you did uni, actually, I really want to take that back. When you first did uni, what was the experience like? And when you did it again, how has that differed? Especially with just the time difference.
Yeah, so it was a big deal when I first went to uni. It was 2000, my first degree. It was a big deal for the lectures to have the slides as a PDF online.
Oh wow!
Right, let alone the lecture online. So
they still can't do that.
There are still some problems with that tech, you're right. But like to even have the slides before the lecture, the lecturers were like, well, no one's going to come. If they can see the PowerPoint slides before I give them, no one's going to come. So it's not they all didn't do it. And literally, zoology may have been a bit old school, right? Because my building was archaic. It was a big sandstone. There were like model saltwater crocodiles hanging from the atrium, and there were, animals kept in cages on the roof.
That's awesome.
It was incredible. Some of the lecturers still had slides. They clicked through slides.
Like the ones that are projected with the lights.
Like a film strip.
Old school film.
Oh my God. Oh, how did...
They
forgive my ignorance. I actually had no idea. How do you even do that?
So they bring their cartridges.
Oh wow!
They would rock up at the lecture with a disc, like a circular disc.
Yeah.
Plot the whole cassette in, and then just start clicking through slides.
Wow!
And you'd hear it go next slide, and then have a little clicker at the front. And then the more advanced ones used PowerPoint. But it was a mix. It was a mix
PowerPoint
bag.
would be new back then.
Yeah, it was like a big deal to roll it out like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what was it like then going and doing medicine at Notre Dame?
So I took a notepad
Yeah.
day one, and everyone had like MacBooks like you're sitting on. I didn't use a computer in my first degree in lectures at all. So that was different. I sat at the front like a good mature age student.
As you should.
But didn't ask lots of questions. And it was wildly different. Like things were recorded, you could watch them later. All the information and the content was out there. It was all hosted. There were ways to engage with each other, offline, online. It was a much more richer online experience second time round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you? This is gonna be like, it's probably gonna be hard to answer. But did you prefer each of the uni experiences?
Don't mind.
Are they both okay?
They both had advantages and disadvantages. Yeah, I think they both have strengths. I think it's what you do, right? Like it's all it could be. So it was.
Yes.
And the people I was studying with had no knowledge that there were other ways of learning. So,
that does make sense.
it's a graduate program, but still the average age was like 25, maybe 24, 25. So you go straight through uni, you do your undergrad, and then you want to get into medicine. So they were still youngish. And so it's all they knew. And so it was actually good. Like, my PBL taught me Snapchat. And I realized that Facebook Messenger was alive and well as a communication tool. There's things I didn't really use, but I got into it.
And what was it like having already had a past career and then coming into medicine? Could you see big changes in the way the workforce worked and the way that, I guess, medical education worked?
It was wild. So it's weird. I had worked for different organisations in Australia and internationally, and I worked for quite sophisticated groups at the same time, a bit of government, non-government. I hadn't done corporate work, but I'd certainly had corporate clients. It was just radical. Like the whole thing seemed archaic and odd. It was strict. I had to sign in at my lectures. They were very strict. Yeah, still strict on attendance. Never fully explained why. And I just felt like at 32, I was kind of like 18 again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Answering to all these other powers, being told where I had to be, when I had to be there, losing a lot of power and agency, which was different. And then the education model seemed to be still people standing up the front and talking, lecturing, and also like an odd way of teaching. Like, so I can't speak for every medical school, but certainly there's some common themes, like very hierarchical, right? Very knowledge driven. So knowledge is currency. What you know is how you prove yourself in medicine. You could be questioned about that knowledge at any time in front of a tutorial group, in front of a lecture, on ward rounds. It didn't matter. You just had to know things, and people wanted to know that you knew things all the time. And then I saw this gap between what would actually be required of healers, given that I'd been sick and I'd spent a lot of time in hospital, being talked at by doctors and worked on by nurses. The skill set needed between what I was learning and what would actually be needed was quite disparate. Stuff like leadership and mentorship and collaboration and communications and basic stuff was kind of glossed over. Like, it's there, but it's not taught in the same way, in the same rigor that the hardcore stuff is, your pathology, your anatomy, your pathophysiology.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's almost as if, I think the way I kind of look at it when med school is run, it's almost as if there's a certain amount of information that you need to know, but the life skills, the social skills are just an expected knowledge. Like you assume knowledge coming in. You just assume that you can lead a team, you can do all this stuff, which is not, like, you don't ever have any formalized teaching for it. They just assume, you'll be competent at it as soon as you graduate. And we don't have any formal way of acquiring that knowledge within the medical school system.
Which is an excellent observation, because it lends to informal learning of that stuff, right? The hidden curriculum, which you learn about. It's weird, they teach us about the hidden curriculum and then don't try and correct it. But there's all this hidden stuff that you learn, and you do that through modeling and really basic learning paradigms. So it's not sophisticated in the same way that a lot of the other biomedical stuff has really matured nicely and is taught in really clever ways. It's assumed because we're people that we'll know the people stuff. And I find that really odd because no other profession does that. They know that there's a mix of content and then process, right? There's a mix of knowledge and skill. And our skills are all clinically focused. You know, it's assessment, exam, diagnostics, that kind of stuff. But there's all this other stuff. Like it's a human sport. Medicine is a human sport. And the weirdest thing is that the person you're trying to heal or help recover or guide is another person. Yeah. And all this stuff happens in this world between you and them that is assumed. It's assumed you'll just get it. And dangerously, it's assumed you'll nail it, you know, which we know a lot of people don't.
What were your views on the healthcare system when you were a cancer patient?
That it was awesome. Yeah, gold standard, right? Like, I'm alive. Yay. Can't fault it. Can't fault it.
It worked.
It worked. I got amazing treatment, like incredible treatment. When you're young and you've got an advanced cancer, you jump straight up. I was all public, didn't pay a cent for any of it. Got radiation like quickly with multidisciplinary team input, level 1 evidence guided the protocol. Side effects were managed well. You know, it was all informed. The whole journey, supported appropriately at each time point by doctors and nursing and allied health. Ushered from that to surgery quickly. The surgery was incredible. It's complicated because of the way my tumour had kind of straddled the sigmoid and attached itself to the rectum and then kind of spread up and was kind of abutting the bladder and was wrapped around some reproductive gear. So it was complicated. It was all done beautifully, elegantly. Then after that, chemotherapy, you know, even when I got bilateral PEs at the end of chemotherapy, like it was just so prompt and precise. The technical stuff was extraordinary. But along the way, I felt some care was lacking, right? And some of the human sides of healthcare were absent. And it's not about an individual clinician. It's not about that. I saw system patterns. And I think I had done that. And I was able to see it that way. One, because I'm not health trained. So I went into this blind. I don't come from doctors. I didn't grow up around this world. It was weird to me. And having been a zoologist and an ecologist, like I was sitting there just thinking about this as habitat. Like, what's the system that's unfolding here? What are the inputs and the outputs? This weird workplace that's been constructed, which I'm supposed to live in, but doesn't feel right for me. It doesn't feel comfortable. It's hostile. The people in it don't really understand what I'm saying. I don't understand what they're saying. And so like it struck me that there were some profound issues with how the whole thing had been engineered. And it's to take nothing away from the care, but we can dial up some of that humanity. We just need to remember what we're doing and why.
And how did your views shift once you became a doctor of the healthcare system and I guess that ecosystem that you were observing as a patient?
I think they started to shift in med school, like before I was qualified, because I was seeing how the minds of future doctors were being molded. I saw that. Some of that's the stuff I've mentioned, you know, that it's competitive, it's rigorous academically. There's a real focus on the skill of being able to sit down and just memorize. You know, that's really what we're selected for initially. And that's really the skill that's honed over time. It's this solitary, weird academic endeavor. I saw that and I saw the cost. You know, I saw people that started off whole and with balance and with empathy and great compassion and great listening skills. I watched those erode, you know, over time as that stuff was replaced with what med school was giving me. And I was able to see connections, you know, like there was a time when I was recovering from my ultra low anterior resection and I was doing really well because you do when you're young and all your organs can handle everything. And then I stopped doing well. And it had turned out that the anastomosis had sprung a leak, but it took a little while to get detected. And I didn't mount a fever straight away and my blood's held. I didn't know any of that at the time, right? That's all doctor speak. Yeah, that's doctor speak. But I was just getting sicker and sicker, and the IVs had to go back in. I started saying no to visitors. Every time I tried to eat, I would just, like, you know, not vomit because I had nothing. I just gag, like dry retch over and over again, 3 times a day, every meal. And I got mum to bring in things that I shouldn't eat and no one should eat, like McDonald's, and like Coca-Cola and Kit Kats to try and get something in.
Comfort food.
Comfort food. And I couldn't. Every time it went to my lips, I would just gag. And I was getting more confused about what was wrong with me, and I wasn't able to do laps of the ward round like I was supposed to. I started saying no to the physio, and it's like I stopped healing and the world around me just went on. You know, every ward round, every blood test, it just kept going. And as I got increasingly worried about what was happening, there was a particular ward round where this whole group rocked up. It's a surgical ward round, right? So it's early. Curtain goes back. I'm sitting there. I get the obligatory questions. You know, have you farted?
Yeah.
What's the stoma
Have your
doing?
bowels opened?
And the stoma was opening. Like it was wild.
Oh,
like
okay.
there were liters of this sickly green stuff coming out. Nothing had settled. And, you know, and they were like, have you eaten? And I said, no, I can't. And then someone stood forward and pointed at me, right? And I didn't know who they were. It didn't introduce themselves. And they're just like, if you don't eat, we're going to put a tube down your throat. And it was such a profound moment because I wasn't angry. I was terrified. In my room of 4 people, I'd seen these tubes go up and down people's throats, and I was terrified of them. I had no idea what they were for. They looked painful. It sounded horrible. And the person who stood forward and pointed at me was able to do that because I was no longer, you know, Ben recovering from bowel surgery. I was like, bed 15, day 7, why isn't he getting better? You know, I was a decompensating metabolic panel, you know, a serum panel. I wasn't a person. And they were also able to do that in front of all those people who I didn't know because it didn't matter what was going on for me. You know, they didn't know that, of course, I, you know, got mum bringing McDonald's, even though I know I'm not supposed to. They didn't know that I'd heard these tubes go up and down people's throats and I'd developed a fear of them. And of course I wanted to eat. Like, what a ridiculous thing to say, right? They were frustrated for whatever reason.
Of course.
Nor did they know that for the last 3 nights, you know, the person beside me was a man in his 80s and he had advanced lung disease and he had begged the doctors every night to kill him. And I was there for that. I was there for those conversations and I was in pain and I wondered if that's where I was going to end up. You know, it just occurred to me that dehumanization, like reducing people, you know, not even to patients, but just to problems, was rife in the system. And I saw the same thing at med school. I saw teachers and educators treat students in a way that they'd forgotten that they were people. You know, they had forgotten that they were there to create the next generation of healers, that there was much more to them than whether they knew which nerve innervated which muscle, right? That we're complex. And the things that matter to patients is so much more than what's in the textbook.
Yeah. It's kind of strange how you teach medicine and how you assess it, because you're taught and you're assessed on how well you can diagnose, treat, and manage a problem. It's like a Viva case is not about the patient. It's never really about like who is there.
No.
It's all of, this is like the Viva case is, this is a description of the problem. What are the steps you need to manage it? There's no real marks for empathy. No. There's no real marks for how well you connect with the patient.
No.
Obviously, you have to build basic rapport, but that's like the bare minimum. It's like, can you treat them like a
person?
Yeah, are you treating them like an actual like human being at the very least?
To not get the rapport mark, you have to be pretty bad.
Yeah, you have to like
you'll get the rapport mark.
Yeah, you genuinely have to like hurt them. In fact, oh my god, terrible stories. But like, I've heard stories of like you like hitting the tuning fork on the patient. And I'm just like,
is this in an OSCE?
Yeah.
Well, they're such ridiculous testing situations, aren't they? I mean, they're important, but that's no way to measure how you're actually going to be with a person, because that's a game. That thing is totally a game.
It's like the older years keep on telling us like, oh, the OSCE, the Viva, it's a performance. It's about getting the marks to graduate, basically, to move on to the next section, to move on to like higher tier problems. It's like a game.
Yep.
You perform a certain way, and then you get the certain marks to do it, and then you moved on.
Yep. And what the problem with that is that becomes how we do things. 100%.
Yeah, because you do what you're
med
taught.
School, why wouldn't you continue?
Why wouldn't you continue doing it?
Efficiency.
It's rewarded because you do things quickly. It gets you marks. It gets you the content you need. I had brilliant educators at Notre Dame, fantastic educators, but even they were like butting their heads against the system. And I said, like, after in year 2, I said, why are we taking histories from each other all day long? This makes absolutely no sense. And why are we doing it in 7 minutes? Like, it makes absolutely no sense. They know the questions and they know the answers. This is ridiculous. And they're like, you need to do it this way, and then you can unlearn it, which is never going to happen.
How do you unlearn?
Well, exactly. But you're also bedding down this way of seeing the world and this way of interacting with people thousands of times over and over again. And so you get to the emergency department and you take a 6-minute history and you think that's a great job. That's not.
I kind of see where they're coming from. Not saying that it's a good thing, but I understand the rationale and I can see how it could be useful for some people.
Yeah.
And I think the data, like when I saw patterns in my colleagues, and I went to PubMed and looked up what we knew about, empathy, listening, compassion in medical training, it all declines. Like no matter where you look, which jurisdiction.
You get worse at it as you progress in medical school.
And so my argument
which is so hilarious.
Well, it's also not surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a model that you're practicing over and over again, which is supplanting and replacing your maybe intuitive way, where you're arguing there's an intuitive way we approach each other.
Yeah.
And I would argue that it unless that's protected, right, and then bolstered, you will lose it. And the data shows that. The data shows that crystal clear. The more you know, the less good you are at that other stuff. And that's horrible.
How do you think that your experiences as a patient, but also as someone who's had other life experience, has changed the way that you deliver empathy to your patients now? Because it sounds like you have quite strong views about how we treat patients and the way that we actually interact with them rather than just treating them like a disease.
Yeah, I think, I can't not embody my experience. It was first, right? So like it came before the medical training, so it's there. And then everything that I learnt went into that scaffold. And I think that was protective for me. It allowed me to take in what I needed to from the medical education system and then hold on to the reason I was there in the first place, which is hard to do. And I even struggled with that at times. In terms of how I approach patients now, it's like I just don't forget that they're patients. And I have to remind myself all the time because I'm a cog in a wheel now. I'm a registrar in a busy system, particularly in psychiatry. And I have to remind and reground myself all the time that the person in front of me is so much more than what I'm ever going to know. And that I need to use all my skills in order to build a relationship with them. Because in psychiatry, we acknowledge, and I think some of the other disciplines have forgotten, that relationship is therapeutic. We call it the therapeutic alliance, and you might even do it in your studies. But it's deep, and it predated medicine, right? That thing has existed between two people for a very long time. And it is the start of healing. And I just have to remind myself that over and over again. And then people around me help me keep me grounded. My wife's very good at it. When she can hear me, she might present a new symptom to me and she can hear me go into the model. Yeah. She's like, wow, hang on. Pause. This isn't an OSCE. And she knows some of the language. She's like, this is not an OSCE. Slow down. And I fall for the trap too. I mean, it's so a part of our learning, isn't it? Yeah. But the hard part is reflecting, pulling out. I think what being a patient did was it gave me time to sit and write, and I think writing is a huge part of it. I mean, that's part of the reason I wrote the book. That's an amazing opportunity to pull out of where you are and just think about what's going on. And that also helps keep me grounded in empathy.
Yeah. And there was one quote that you had in your book, and you said, as students and doctors, we're surrounded by resources better than any textbook on how to empathise and connect with patients, and it's the patient themselves. We need look no further than the end of a stethoscope to find out what it feels like to look like on the other side. What are your practical tips, I think, for empathy for medical students who are trying to retain that empathy in what can be sometimes a pretty difficult system?
Yeah. Look, I almost think I feel bad because I don't have a great list. And the reason I don't is because I don't want to take pressure off the system that teaches us and trains us to instill these qualities in us, right? Yep. It's a bit like the well-being space at the moment. That we're moving, it's getting mature. But for a few years there, it was just like get doctors to do yoga or give them bottled water and everything will be okay.
That's such a corporate.
No,
it's a corporate thing.
It is, but it's also like they think it's easy, and those things have evidence base, right? If you're hydrated and you're stretching with yoga, you're going to feel great. But if the system's crap, you're not. Yeah. So my point is, yes, there's things you can do. So I try to, when I'm supervising students, I always encourage curiosity.
Yeah.
So be curious about the chest pain and whether it radiates and how it started and what alleviates
What's the character?
it. Right, yeah. Do your Socrates, be very curious. But be curious about something else, find something else, and don't be afraid of connecting. We don't have to. It's just a weird thing that we've hidden, and it's mainly hidden curriculum, where we feel like we need to be something.
Yeah.
We've lost the white coats, right?
Yeah.
But we've still got them. We've just got them psychologically. We've still got that barrier between us and the patients, and there'll always be differences because we know more about the particular thing, often the academic side at least, not the lived side, and we understand how the system works. There'll always be power and knowledge asymmetry. That's a given.
Yeah.
Don't add other things that are going to corrupt the ability to connect. So be curious. Be mindful of the theatre, right? So how are you standing? How are you sitting? Can other people hear the conversation? We don't, and it's hard when you're a junior doctor and a medical student to say, I don't actually want to take the history here.
Yeah.
Because things may come out in the history that you are going to feel very uncomfortable about.
Yeah. You don't want to talk it in like a room, like one of the big rooms.
Pull the curtain and off you go, right? You start asking someone about their STIs.
Curtains aren't walls.
They're not walls. They are not walls.
Curtains are not walls.
So I'm always aware of the environment because without that, it maybe comes back to mycology. If that isn't set up for success, you'll get nowhere. It doesn't matter how empathic you are, the person will close down. And then it's about just good listening skills. All the nonverbals that you're doing for me right now. Lots of head shaking, lots of appropriate smiling. We're gesturing to each other. That's stuff you can do. And it's very easy when you're doing Socrates to jump into it and then be running through the next letter.
Yeah.
And they can see that. Your eyes change. They might head off into a certain direction. There's a little twitches.
You do like that.
Yeah. And you're not really listening to the answer because you've heard radiation and you're moving on. Yeah, but it's about really listening. Deep listening, we call it in psychiatry.
I find it very interesting that when I'm in a hospital setting, I talk and communicate completely differently to if I were just talking to a friend.
So true.
Have you noticed that? Is that like something that you kind of notice, like the shift between hospital speak and talking to patients and just talking to a normal friend?
Yeah, there's a whole field of linguistics that studies this. I've made some friends with some researchers at UCID. Medical linguistics is a rich field, and they do amazing studies where they videotape and record consultations, and then they do clever analysis to what happens. There's a script. When I use the word theatre, I use it deliberately. There's a role that
it's a drama performance.
Yeah, you've got a social role, or the sick role as we call it. I'm the role as the expert, and we do this dance, we do this exchange, and there's things we expect each other to say, and some of that is necessary. Because it is a particular type of relationship, right? It is special, very
it's a therapeutic
special
relationship.
Absolutely, and it's also professional, and there are ethical boundaries, and you're talking about someone's vulnerabilities in a really intricate way. That all needs to be respected. But you can bring yourself, right? You can you insert a little bit of Sean when you talk to Dan, and Dan likes that. Right? Dan, he told me Dan likes that. I go to the same cafe, and so I think you can do the same thing with patients. You can do the same thing. It's just not being afraid. Connecting doesn't compromise your knowledge. And what the point I make over and over again, the thing we understand in psychiatry deeply is connection is your gateway to a better history. It's your gateway to a better history. And through that, you will learn the levers of management. You will learn what will and won't work in what you're about to propose.
Psychiatry is notoriously poorly taught in medical school.
Oh no!
This is such
Your experiences of psychiatry in medical school, why did you want to become a psychiatrist?
So I'm so sad that it's poorly taught.
I think it's difficult to teach.
Just across the board, it's quite difficult to teach.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I did win a teaching prize at this school. For supervising students down at Sutherland. Thank you. I wasn't saying that just for the camera. I was just saying, I don't think it's easy to teach well, right? It just needs a little bit of time. Yeah. And your theatre, psychiatry has all the theatre. We've got centuries of pedigree. Everyone knows Freud. Everyone knows the armchair analysis. People understand. Even where mental health treatment occurs is quite theatrical in the sense that they're purpose-built environments. They look strange. They can be hostile. They're alien. And a lot of that can antagonize, I think, the learner and intimidate, but it doesn't need to. You know, to me, it's the specialty that does unite us all, because we all have thoughts and feelings, right? We all have bad days and good days.
That's true.
Yeah, we all grew up so we can understand development. We understand attachment. They're actually, because it's our humanity that allows us, I think, to share in psychiatry's richness. And that's certainly the approach I take. I think partly too, there's a few specialties, and you know, psychiatry is one of them. They haven't been active at med school. You know, it's almost seen like it's the thing that you'll decide to do later.
Yeah.
There's some stigma around selecting it. So even when I was a busy intern and I was telling people, oh, I'm going to apply for psychiatry, you know, it wasn't uncommon for people to say, oh, you're going to lose all that medicine.
Yeah.
Why would you bother doing all this if you're just going to go and do psychiatry? So there's a lot of stigma around it. And I think some of that we've internalized, right? Like some of that as psychiatrists. You know, we take on, and we might bring that sense of inadequacy to the teaching environment. Sure. And I think we get caught up in our words. Like psychiatry's got the best words. You know, there's lots of long German words that we have to memorize for exams, which are totally ridiculous, that name like a very particular type of delusion you have on a Tuesday morning in the presence of a sun, you know, like some ridiculous thing. I'm being dramatic, but the point I'm trying to make is there's lots of specific language, and that can be alienating. The other thing psychiatry's got to grapple with is, and sorry for rambling on this, but you've unleashed me, is we have done such a good job communicating mental health awareness, which was not psychiatric led, by the way, it was community led, that a lot of our words have gone out into the population and now have entirely different meanings. And so new learners, new learners and med students may have might have an understanding of psychiatry that's quite different from actual psychiatry. You know, there's lots of talk about depression, anxiety, and ADHD and autism, and those conversations are amazing. So some of psychiatry now is actually correcting what I do with students. Is I correct some of the understanding they may have picked up via other channels, and that's, to your point, that's a problem, because we should be in there, right, at med school, instilling that knowledge from day one.
Yeah, that's so true. I think a part of it is also that psychiatry has a little bit less of like you can't see it, essentially. It's like it's a talking specialty almost. There's a certain therapeutic relationship to do with like just either cognitive behavioral therapy or something like that, where it's more discussion based and it's a little bit more nebulous in the minds of a medical student compared to anatomy, because bone is bone. That is a bone. That is the name of the bone, and it's really like
totally.
Yeah, it's there's a certain concreteness to it, and it's just like bone, muscle, tendon, organ. That is the thing. That psychiatry doesn't have as much. It's even hard to localize areas of the brain.
Oh, totally.
Where when you're talking about like psychiatric symptoms.
Oh, we spent billions of dollars on it, and we still don't have a great grasp.
I think just like that lack of like an anatomical relationship that you can't physically see makes people get really confused by it.
I think it scares people.
It scares them.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Because like the founding fathers of psychiatry were all neurologists. So they were obsessed with the organ that is the brain. And then we're able to move into this space. And now we're kind of confused by it, I think.
I have a really hot take.
And
it goes something like, it's like everything's the brain, from neurosurgery to psychiatry. And it's just along one spectrum with neurology in the middle. And it goes from gross to microscopic. And it goes, there's a tumor in the brain. We will cut that out because we can see it. And it's this big, right? And that's like neurosurgery. And as you go further along, where there's damage to neural bunches of neurons, certain like nerves are either overactive or underactive, that steps into neurology. And then when you finally get into the wiring, that's the problem. Then you end up in psychiatry. And it should all just be one specialty.
Oh, I've never thought of that.
So it was, right?
Yeah.
So it was, and like psychiatrists used to do psychosurgery, which is now illegal because it was a bit weird. But yeah, no, you're right. And in our old training programs, we had to do terms in neurology and vice versa. Like we had to do the other.
Yeah, at least you had to know the adjacents.
Yeah. And some of my favorite discussions are with neurologists because we do come at the brain quite differently. The problem psychiatry has is every time a disease is mapped or a marker is found, neurology take it off us. So, like a lot of the encephalitis, for example, they cause psychosis that you can't distinguish until you run like a autoimmune panel. You find NMDA, autoimmune antibodies, and then you go get IVIG.
And then it becomes like a neurology issue.
Antipsychotics. But we still treat the stuff that's seen to be in the mind.
Yeah,
and it's all grounded in an organ.
Yeah,
your point is it's an organ. There's nothing magic about it. It's an organ.
Yeah.
But our stuff we can't see, and they've spent a long time looking. In 2013, when the DSM-5 was published, the American Research Institutes of Mental Health decided to pivot away from diagnostic criteria and description and go looking for the biology. Billions of dollars, and we've chipped away at it, but we're nothing like a marker or a prognostic test or even a gene really that gives you any predictive power.
But it does make sense though. It's an environmental thing as well because your brain is constantly active. It's constantly rewiring, and that's where psychology kind of like goes in. Psychiatry kind of goes in. It's the rewiring of the brain. That's the problem, and it's very hard to find like a distinctive cause. It's very hard to medicate, and that's like the entire field. Yeah,
but having said that, our pharmacology is advancing beautifully. And a lot of things that we weren't able to treat that long ago, we can treat now, and that's a game changer. Yep.
Very exciting in psychiatry.
What do you think appealed to you most about psychiatry in comparison to other medical specialties?
The psychiatric history, it's without doubt, and formulation. So in year 2, I never actually answered your question, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
What drew me to psychiatry was a PBL topic in year 2. Okay. It was called What's Wrong with Tim? And it was, I still remember it right. And I was allocated as like the facilitator that week. And it was about a first episode psychosis in a young university student. And I was just so compelled by the psychiatric history, the extra headings we have. Yeah. And the fact that most of it was social history, which in like the cardio history or the gastro history was always the bit that most interested me. Yeah. It wasn't just smoking and exercise for me. It was much more. And that was all of psychiatry. And then the elegance of formulation, the elegance of taking a person and distilling them down to protective factors and prognostic factors and perpetuating factors, all the P's, right? And then weaving this narrative about how this person ended up right here at this time. And then the power of that to manage or guide that person into the future. Formulation is something that we're at risk of losing. There's lots of debate in my field at the moment about our formulation skills. And as we've moved towards a biomedical model, it's become less and less emphasized because it is a lot about which receptor do we going to target here and at what dose. But there's a revival because it's our secret power. Like to me, that's psychiatry's secret power. It's the ability to synthesize a person in all their complexity and then find a way forward, which I think any specialty could benefit from.
It's like mapping a person's life. Yeah. And almost helping them understand it.
As much as you can. Yeah. Right. Acknowledging all the limitations in the information we get from people and what they want to tell us and what they're ready to tell us. Yeah, but it's a good go at it.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like it all stems from it, right? Because your thoughts, your actions are one and the same. And if you can't fix your thoughts, you will just continuously have this cycle of behaviors that will negatively detrimentally affect your life. And that's like the essence of what you're trying to solve when you push and try to create the map of the person.
You've done some CBT training. You're like a poster child for the Beck Institute. That's a very CBT model, right? So thoughts and feelings, thoughts and behaviors, that's the whole tripartite model. And yes, that is true. That is true for lots of illnesses, that the thoughts can be modified in a way that then goes and corrects pathology. It's not all like that. But certainly lots of it are. But you hit on a really interesting point, which is thoughts matter. Yeah. And they matter to all diseases.
Yes.
Right? Exactly. So I'm specializing in consultation liaison. Yeah. So interesting. I'm at that interface between medicine and psychiatry, which I would argue are both medicine fields. Yeah. So psychiatry and the general hospital patient, right? And, I get referred people all the time and it's just that they haven't thought about this person's thoughts. Yes. What do they think about their renal transplant? Yeah. How are they going to approach the immune modulator they need to take for life? Why don't they come to your appointments?
Yeah, it's just as simple as like, why most of the time, if it's like a lifestyle thing, why are they even in your office? Like if like a cardiologist comes in and they've got like massive hyperlipidemia and they don't have any family history for it, but they just eat a lot of junk food. why.
Why? Good. I agree.
Because it's not like and it's similar to like when you said before, when you were trying to eat and you couldn't. It was just like, this is the problem. How do I solve it? And not like, why are you not eating? Like, is there something that's stopping you, or is it like you physically can't, or like is it a mental thing? And I think a lot of diseases in other specialties could benefit a lot from having that thought process and having the understanding of the patient, so they can at least gain some sort of semblance of what has led them to present to the clinic.
Yeah, totally. And the interesting extension of that is we often get called when patients don't do what they're asked to do. We rarely get
Why
called.
are you not compliant?
Right? we rarely get called when they want to do what the doctor wants to do. And I think that's very interesting to think about because, you know, they're still having thoughts and those factors still matter. Whether they choose to take the statin or not, those factors are there. And it's funny. It's almost like it doesn't want to take the statin. It must be a psychiatric issue. You know, but we ignore the psychiatry that's at play when people do what we want them to do. And I'd argue people do what doctors want them to do for a whole range of reasons. And it's not often, you know, it's not always what they want to do.
It's fortunate if like your views align with the patient's, but sometimes it doesn't.
And sometimes they'll just do it because the doctor's asking. You know, we know consent is biased towards us because they want to do what we want them to do.
That makes perfect sense. It's like, I'm here, treat me.
We never question it. Now, I never get questions about capacity when someone wants the treatment. I only get questions about capacity when someone doesn't want a treatment.
That is really, that's actually really concerning. I've never thought about that. Because they just say yes, and in your brain you're just like, oh, great.
They understand what I'm saying.
Because your shared view is, they understand the risks and benefits like I do. No, they don't.
It's the assumption that they're on the same page as you.
Yeah, because the answer is agreeable to what you want to do. Right? It's in your favor.
I do wonder how a psychiatric consultation would be ordered if they agreed. And it's just like, like they agreed to the treatment. It's like, I don't believe that. like can we just check whether you actually understand?
Well, I mean, the caveat to this conversation, because it's nice and theoretical, is that we always presume capacity, right? We always assume it's there. It's decision specific. It's time limited. We give people the benefit of the doubt, and we should.
Yes.
I'm just saying it's interesting.
Yeah, it is
as
fascinating.
a field, we don't question, you know, things that are in our favor. We only question when they're not. And I agree. And if I got that consult, I'd be actually really excited about it because academically, I think that's great.
Yeah, it's just
like imagine if I went along and I unpacked it. They've got a radically different understanding of what is going to,
especially with a language barrier.
I think it does actually happen.
It happens all the time and then I get called after the surgery, after the procedure,
and they're like there's like distress,
or cranky or distressed. You wonder why.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't know that was going to be sticking out of me for the next 6 months. And they're like, I told you, it's in the consent form.
It's like, I didn't read that. Like, it's like nobody reads like the full terms and conditions.
No.
Fine print.
Yeah. And it's also like, especially scary, it's like the list, like the huge list of like, this could happen. And it's just like, this is what we want to do. Like, this is a procedure. But you might have like, and there's just like a huge list of potentially devastating consequences. And then they kind of just go like, oh, can you just sign here to acknowledge that you've read it? And that doesn't click for a lot of people.
No. I mean, and there's legislation around this, right? There's the legal precedent with what we are expected to communicate. And that should always be done. But then within that, there's room because, again, it comes back to meeting that person where they need to be. And some people are high information needs and will go away in PubMed. Some just want to know what date they're going to be there and how long they'll be in hospital, right? You got to meet people where they are. We got off topic, sorry.
Yeah.
But how do you think that your experiences as a psychiatrist have shifted your perspective on work-life balance as a doctor, as someone who has a family, friends, all sorts of things going on in your life?
And writing a book as well.
Yeah.
So the caveat there is I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a trainee. I need to keep saying that.
Close enough for us.
You're getting there.
I'm a trainee. Work-life balance. I don't know. I think this is tough.
Fair enough.
It's tough. I mean, there's whole parts of New South Wales Health trying to work on this. You know, whole LHDs have teams dedicated to addressing this, and it's multifactorial. It's going to be at all levels. The unit, the training, the colleges, the HR system, the collaboration and collegiality. It's all about how you get to work, if there are showers at work, whether you can park your bike. It's so complicated.
What?
And infinite. Yeah, it's infinite. But I don't know if it's psychiatry as much as my experience having been sick is the ultimate calibrator for me. Because, you know, I was faced with my own death.
Yeah.
And I think when you've had that happen, everything takes on a different sheen, and your litmus test for what matters is altered forever. And I do slip into the old routines and the old patterns of saying yes to things I don't really want to do, and putting my hand up for the extra lecture and not pushing back when I'm expected to do another tutorial or resit an exam because I just failed one, which I think we should talk about in another podcast. You know, there's components to it, but I have that experience, and that keeps me grounded in what matters. But that tension is real, and for me to sit here and go, it's rainbows and unicorns, it isn't. That the tension between who we are and what we do as a job is real. And I think the shift I've seen in particularly students and also junior doctors coming behind me is that I'm not so sure they're prepared to put up with crap anymore. I think there's a real cultural shift as the generations come through, and they, you know, the archaic HR system we have from the 50s is not going to cut it. And there's a reason, you know, large tracts of medicine are contemplating leaving. When you think about the sunk cost
fallacy
in that, like for them to overcome that is huge. For someone to say, I'm going to pop away,
the amount of people leaving medicine.
Yeah, it's huge. And the medical training surveys that are done each year of the junior medical workforce consistently show double digits thinking about bailing. They're thinking about it. They may do it. COVID forced a lot of people to make those decisions and get out. But the tension is real, and I think that we've got so much work to do to sort that out and to modernise the healthcare system from a HR perspective, let alone all the fancy stuff that other worlds and corporations are doing.
I want to ask a little bit about like just relationships in medicine. And the reason why I want to ask that is I think a lot of people get a little bit concerned because medicine is such an all-encompassing career. It like cannibalizes your life. It takes over things. And there's, you know, the late night calls. You have to, like during residency, you're basically in hospital like all the time. Like it's very
depending on the
term.
It's very term dependent. Yeah.
Like surgical terms are like ridiculous. So I've heard. Some other internal medicine specialties are a little bit nicer, but for the most part, it's a really all-encompassing degree. And just because of the way it's structured as well, there's a huge bubble that surrounds like the medicine kind of workforce. When you start doing medicine, you're in like this random building somewhere and you don't see the other degrees as much.
It's true.
Especially true in UNSW.
Is it?
Wallaceworth is our building.
Opposite end of the campus.
It's
everything else.
It is literally
everything
the
else.
furthest possible away. It is you've seen it. It's like it's a corner. It's like the corner of the pie.
Like one street away from Prince of Wales Hospital.
Yeah, and it's just it's so far away. And a lot of my friends are on lower campus, or like I talk to them, and they're like, oh, you know, I go up, go down. You know, like I see all these friends along the way. I don't think I've seen a single other person does not do medicine for like months.
That is true.
It's so
insular.
Isolating.
It's insular.
And as soon as you get into the hospital system, you only ever interact with other people, because how do you like other medical students, other medically trained people, and just other parts of the medical workforce or allied health. It's very hard to get away from that, because it's almost like you sit down and you talk to like anybody else doing a normal job. And like you're just like, oh, the patient had blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it just makes no sense to them, and it's very hard to connect to them.
It is, and part of the issue there is our work is quite odd.
It's so specialized.
It's quite odd. Yeah. You know, you're going to be, and nor is it appropriate often
Yeah.
to talk about the things that happen
Oh
to us
yeah,
at
the
work,
inguinal
right?
hernia that I saw.
Yeah, you know, but my friends and I, you make really good friends at med school. Everyone says that, and it's true.
That's a trauma bond.
Possibly. No, possibly you're right. I don't feel traumatized by med school, but
That's good.
I think
That's definitely a minority.
Yeah, I think you know, the registrars friends I've got now who are going into AT and approaching consultancy, like we can talk about you know, the cardiac arrest that didn't end well. the patient that hit them. I had a friend recently who was assaulted in anesthetics. We can talk about this stuff. It's hard to talk about with other people. So that feeds that, I think, in a way. And you're right that the nature of the work and the hours mean you tend to be free when other medical people are free, and you're
not free.
So isolating.
And you're not free when
Weekend
other people.
shifts. Yeah, you're not free when they're free. But the funny thing about that is, like, I've got a couple of close friends from med school, and us trying to meet up is almost impossible because we're at different hospitals. Yes. We're at different hospitals and we're on different rosters and we're in different departments. It's like we hardly ever get to see each other. But face to face, there's lots of rich online stuff.
Discord, just like.
But medicine is so isolating. You are so right, and we can be surrounded by people all day, but be lonely.
It is the most. It's the biggest echo chamber I've seen ever. You see like the online echo chambers, and it's just like, this is like a physical in-person echo chamber that's so hard to leave.
Even when you're walking into the hospital, I just think of it as like a little world. There's even like a hospital. It's a world. Hospital weather. I don't even dress for the outside weather. No. When I'm at hospital, I'm like, I dress for the hospital weather.
You live there,
No, that's true. It's true. And you eat hospital food, and you sit on hospital grounds and eat. I know, it's totally true. They are, but it's so important that you're already thinking about this, because the other part of you is really important, probably more important, I'd argue.
Yeah.
And one thing I did, which I can't encourage because it's a silly thing to say, but I didn't marry someone from medicine.
Yeah.
I'm married to a journalist who doesn't take any of my doctor bullshit. Can I swear on this? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Surely it's fine.
Bullshit, yeah.
Hopefully.
And doesn't, will call me out.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, ego. Like, calm down. Calm down. I know you're saving lives. Calm down. Will keep me grounded. And I've got a 4-year-old son who does that more than anyone. But surrounding yourself with people that aren't in the game is really important.
That's really interesting.
But holding on to those relationships, like you've said, is actually a challenge.
Have you found anything that's helped?
I've lost so many people. You do. You just drift. Because it's impossible to stay in touch. And when you go into an exam cycle, like when you're a registrar...
you're on radio silent.
The BPT cycles are 18 months for their first writtens.
Yeah.
Mine, we do more exams and we split them up, but it's like 3 to 6 months each block. It's every Saturday, Sunday. That's not conducive to socialising, is it? It's not conducive at all. You just have to try and keep those touch points alive when you can. Thank God for WhatsApp. Thank God for video calls. Time in the car, commuting between hospitals and work is a good time to catch up. Milestone events, you've got to protect. You've got to protect weddings, birthdays, christenings, whatever it is. You've got to try and swap shifts and lean on your colleagues to get to those things, because they matter. Those things really matter, because in the deep dark hours of a night shift, they're the memories you're going to draw on.
That's powerful. It's almost the value of friendships outside of medicine. The values of friendships, period, is they're the things that get you to go on. They're the things that will actually get you through the training, because the training is hard. The studying is hard. Getting through and like becoming a doctor, the entire process is hard. And without the kind of support systems that you have around you, without maintaining and like basically freshening up friendships and continuously allowing them to grow, if you suffocate them, you'll have nothing left by the time you've finished.
Medicine's a team sport. That I say that because it holds in your personal world and your professional world. It is a team sport. One of my friends posted on Instagram just yesterday, her husband passed the surgical exams. And she had a post about it, lots of photos of him getting his award and then a celebratory dinner. And the comments were like, yay, congrats. And I wrote back and I said, congratulations to you. You're part of the reason that he was able to sit the surgical exams, right? You took the kids.
Yeah.
You packed the lunches. And she's a registrar herself. Like, could you imagine how hectic it is?
Yeah.
But it's like, it is a team sport. It is not, I'm not here passing exams and doing well or written a book because it's me. There's a team around me. And the balance is respecting that team while needing to prioritize what you have to do. It's a real trade-off.
It's like, the only reason why we as medical students or you as a trainee are able to dedicate the time and effort into what we need to learn is because of the support systems around us.
Totally.
Like that's the only reason, because otherwise you just would not be able to cope with it, because it's like it's impossible
It's too
for
much
one person.
for one person,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's
too
like
much for one person.
you're essentially you're leaning on everyone else to be able to get through the program.
Yeah, and you owe them.
Yeah,
And you know, it's a legit guilt I carry.
Yeah.
Like I owe it. Like I was talking to my wife the other day, and as I approach my letters, you know, at the end of 2025, I've been thinking, I've always wanted to do a PhD, and I've been thinking about, I'm going to do a PhD. I might write a second book, and she's like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know, and that's a joint decision because she knows what the cost is.
Yes.
And you know, it takes mutual respect to make that decision together, and take that feedback. It's like, you weren't a great person writing that book.
Yeah.
It took a lot.
Oh, that's
Maybe you just hold off. Give us a few more years of just chilling.
There's a certain privilege to
Yeah,
be able
absolutely.
to dedicate the time that is required to finish a medical degree. And I think everyone in medical school should like at least acknowledge that it exists, because not everyone is able to do a medical degree.
Most people
Are not able
just
to do it.
because of their social standing.
Just like they're physically unable to.
Absolutely.
And it's not even like just, oh, the uni fees are too much.
No,
No, it's not at all.
There's so many other structural factors.
It's the fact that the uni fees are too much,
Yeah.
and you can't work when you're studying.
Yeah. Where's daycare?
Yeah.
Where's the school closest
what
to
do
the
you-
med school?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Where's the Centrelink support to keep you afloat? Where's the rent subsidies? Where's the accommodation? Like, there's so many factors. Where's the med school you got to move to, right?
Yeah.
And we move all the time
Yeah.
as you move hospitals.
It's crazy.
And transport.
It's crazy. Yeah. I know, you just expected to do it. Yeah, and the privilege that you're right, you're so right. And I hope your colleagues are aware and those conversations are happening. I mean, we talk a lot about privilege now in society. It's fantastic. You know, and I hope that that's filtering down.
Yeah.
Because that's an important discussion for medicine.
Like even the way that when I chat to people who aren't in medicine in degrees and we just talk about what we do, I always love to ask people, what are you studying? What are your courses? And talk about it. And I try and avoid actually saying what I study, because as soon as you say medicine, they go, oh, wow. And
It's
they
like
just,
a, yeah.
they have this,
Oh, it makes
this
me
reaction. And I'm
cringe
like,
so much.
no. Like,
No.
What do you mean? Is it like admiration or pity?
I think it's a mixture of both.
I think, yeah.
But it's almost like I really value what other people do outside of medicine.
Yeah.
And when you see the way other people uphold doctors, it makes me think,
Yeah.
first and foremost, it's a massive privilege to be training to become a doctor. But also it makes me think, what have doctors done to inflate that ego and make people, I guess, view them in that kind of almost godlike manner?
Yeah. So part of that's not the doctor's fault.
No.
Right? Part of it is that it's a healing role.
Yeah.
And that has always been held up by society as really important. Whether it's your local shaman, you know, if we go back millennia, it's a temple that you went to sacrifice and beg for forgiveness. We've always held those things to a high standard. So we've just, as humans, have taken that role.
as you should.
As you should.
Because
it's an important thing.
It is.
Our health is important.
Yeah.
We've decided that as a society.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's important. The other part of the privilege you've just flagged is you come to med school with privilege, and then you're given all this other privilege, right? So much status, so much social capital, social mobility. And I don't think we talk about that enough.
No.
Because that is a huge source of the divide between us and the people we're healing. And, you know, you can't get rid of it, but you can acknowledge it and you can try and manage it.
this sounds, this is going to sound a little bit strange, but one thing that I've kind of thought about, well, I've said this to a few people and I was wondering whether they agreed as well, was that like medicine is probably like the cleanest way to make a pretty good amount of money.
Clean how?
Clean how? As in like, it's almost, it seems like society can like justify the higher socioeconomic status of someone who's a doctor. It's like when you see like a banker or like an investment banker or like a lawyer or like someone that works in like a job that's like more representing, like that represents less of a medical field and more of like a trades or business kind of side. It's like nobody gets complaints about a millionaire doctor per se, unless they're like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they always complain about, this millionaire, like, you know, salesperson is doing
Must be doing something dodgy to get there.
Something dodgy to get there. And especially if you're in sales, there's almost like a certain kind of like, the only reason why you're able to make money, you're getting the cut between the consumer and like the producer, and it's just like you're not physically doing anything per se. There's almost like it's like medicine has like almost a clean cleanliness.
Yeah.
In
Well, it's
society.
seen as noble.
Yeah.
Right? It's virtuous.
Yeah.
It's contributing.
But well, yes, but also why doesn't that extend to Parliament? Because that is also a form of service, and there's a noble fee as well. It's
Totally.
yeah, right.
But they lie a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. But like I guess in certain ways we also do a similar thing. We kind of serve the community, and we do what we can for the betterment of the community in our eyes. And it's just that government goes through policy, and we go through healing. And it's not always that government chooses the best policy, and it's not always that we choose the best treatments for all patients all the time.
I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
And what you've hit on is the disparity in how we value the virtuous professions, both in terms of social capital and economic reward, right? Like, you can't have this conversation without acknowledging teachers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? I think the most profound job on earth. Aren't treated well.
No.
It's such a shame.
Aren't treated well, right?
And
so you're right. And I think doctors can forget that they make good money. There's a lot of angst at the moment that they, and because they're benchmarking against the financial investment broker, they're benchmarking against the person who owns the property in Vaucluse, fancy part of Sydney.
it's very easy to as well, especially because they graduate sooner as well. There's like not nearly as much formal training involved.
Yeah, in the other fields you're talking about. Yeah. No, I mean, our road is long.
Yeah.
And it's highly regimented, isn't it?
And we don't make money until the end.
And you have to
Basically.
pay money.
Yeah, we have to keep on paying money as well. Yeah.
I think I've paid like $7,000 to my college this year, in combination between training and exam fees. Yeah.
And like one of my friends is like graduating this year, and they got a graduate offer of like 300,000.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Per year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, without bonuses. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I would like, I'm the same age.
Same age.
What? You're telling me next year you can have the down payment on a house easily, and I'm paying.
Yeah, you're paying.
Paying money.
Paying.
I'm negative.
Yeah, I know. The medical model is odd. It's odd.
But I guess it comes down to the matter of, are you doing medicine for the money, or to be what you say, a healer, and actually make an impact in your community? And I think after chatting to you, it's clear that you should be doing medicine for the healing, which I agree with.
You would have done amazing in the interview.
We can't hide away from the fact that we are paid, right? We are paid for it. And, I don't know if you know the big class action that was just settled against New South Wales itself. It's hundreds of millions. And anyone who worked between a certain period is entitled to a piece of that. But, we are paid for it. And at times we're paid very well for it. And I think that should be acknowledged. And you do need money, right? We need it. Like, you can't just...
It's the same thing. Like, you will not be able to study the things you need to study and dedicate the time you need to dedicate to learning all the things you need to know to become a good practitioner without the financial security that the salary of a medical professional earns. You just won't be able to do it because you can't dedicate time into studying for a BBT exam if you don't have like at least stable rent money and like stable
It's a
food
piece
money.
of the puzzle. Agreed.
You need that because otherwise you just get locked in. You can't dedicate to it, and you end up in a very strange situation.
I mean, we've talked about a lot of, I guess, problems, but I mean, to wrap up, what do you think are some of the things that we can look forward to as a medical profession, and things that we as students should be, I guess, really